Rinpoche first requests us to set our mind in the noble disposition of bodhicitta, turning our hearts in loving care to all sentient beings throughout the limits of space, and longing to establish them in utterly pure, most perfect and precious enlightenment. In order to establish beings in that state, then we are studying the Buddha Dharma, and in our studies and practice today, we will be looking first at the Ninth Karmapa's text, or Mahamudra, which is called Pointing Out the Dharmakaya. This text, as indeed many texts, is in three main parts: the most auspicious beginning, the most auspicious main body of the text, and the most excellent or auspicious conclusion of the text. And the first part, which is the most excellent introduction, is in fact an explanation of the title of the text itself. The title is rather long. So if we translate it, then it is, herein lies the pointing out of the Dharmakaya, or pointing out to the Dharmakaya, which is the heart nectar, which is like an ambrosia, or like a lamp which clarifies the very heart of all of the explanations concerning Mahamudra, which is that which arises simultaneously, or if we use the Sanskrit, the Sahaja Mahamudra.
等你得打不得弄个山了最佳呢，他山弄个他小姐全部是你这人个双人着他等你的侬那我牺牲侬把你着我写个的。
In the title of this text, there is the word recognition or pointing out. And this recognition of mind, of the nature of mind, happens in two ways. We can understand mind first through the profound words of the ancient masters of our lineage, and what they said and what was written is vast indeed, and this gives us, in terms of words and ideas, one notion of mind and of the true nature of mind. The other is much more immediate. It comes from our own experience, where through practice we come to know the mind and say, this is what it is.
송제장된 가동 탐바 롱동 탐바 리바동 탐바 지리디오 바레 데레디오나 데 야부지 마히나 마롱고 콩도 되니 휴지 콩도 야부지 요바인 메바인 하고 힘은데 데인들라나 통마 더 야부지 하고 근데
Actually, we need both of these. The first one, which is the advice and instructions and explanations of the masters of old, is very important, because what they tell us about the mind, about Mahamudra, is based upon the Buddha's own instruction. It is completely in harmony with the Buddha's own shasana or teaching. It's in harmony with all of the scriptures which are based on that, of the great traditions, and it's in harmony with logic itself, Buddhist logic. If one has well digested all of that, then when it comes to actually meditating, there will be no doubt as we take the mind within, then because we have the instructions clearly, we will not be wondering, is it this, is it that? Once one has understood enough of the traditional teachings, then the most important thing is to practice and discover the truth of those teachings within one's own practice and within one's own mind. Otherwise, there's no benefit. These two things, the traditional scriptures and one's own experience, are two very different things. They're quite separate. In one way, of course, they're connected, because when we meditate and practice, our own experience that arises will correspond to what the ancient masters have told us. So, of course, because they both arise from the same basis, which is the truth of mind, they have the same basis, then of course there's some correspondence. But if we actually look at what they are, then they're very different. The teachings of the ancient masters came from their experience. We don't have that experience. That was their experience. The second one, when we practice ourselves, this is what arises from our experience. These two things are quite different. It's very, very important to understand this.
Te song yojedo, da sen karinda uji yolere lavanda, sen donera kamapa tendi song yanduas, sen turara tendi song yanduas, sonjig tendi song yandua, tendi lana, the yapo yoba mare. Carire denana, sen donere, sen turare sejido, sonjig to pare, kamapa kono to pare. Dinora, kamapa kono nyanu, nyana se don't hear, Narong nyanu se don't hear mere. Narong nyanu the hear mere. Then you know, Tura yenada, only yenada, then you did Narong Quarog and do the man. Come up, Sonjado, Sonjig Sonjada, Takoro, Tony is and the Sonjig Sonjosagina, the Sonjig to pare, the Manarong to Pamare, the Kamapi to pare, the Manarong to Pamare. Then you know, then you Kakashagadu. Narong Toba, Narong Senoni, Turaina, Turain told Narong Haku, Narong Togandu. The Kamapita Sogan do to Lana. Kamapiquare, Kamapitobare, the Mangarongo Mare. Then Kamapitoba, Marona Pedu, Marongo Topatuna, Marona Pedu. Then Yapu Hago do the man. Tata children can Momochigo, then you any Hakomadu. Pena, or Turare, Tangarongo to the injury, Tadina, Jimadu. Tonere, Songan, that only injury, Tadina, Jimadu. Tonya Yamba to Turayambada, Maronga Santoni, Guayapuchi Rogadu. Senoni toba yapu yogundu, the Tayona, the Yapu de Matamena, then he go out the Marongo to Cargi, to say Carladini, took the Petu Yomari.
So it really is very important to distinguish between these two things. So, for instance, when in this text we come to the words of the Ninth Karmapa, or in other texts where we read Mahamudra teachings from the Third Karmapa, then it tells us things such as the true nature of mind is voidness, or it tells us that the true nature of mind is beyond any conceptual fabrication. That was their realization. They'd practiced, they realized this, and so they taught, and then their teachings are written down in the form of the true nature of mind is voidness, it's beyond conceptual fabrication. They had that experience, we didn't. So it's absolutely no use us saying the true nature of mind is voidness, it's beyond conceptual fabrication, because we're just repeating the words of somebody else's realization. In that case, those two great masters. And what we need is to have that realization ourselves. If we ourselves have got to the point where we find the truth of mind, and we realize it's voidness, and we realize it's totally beyond anything that the intellect can fabricate, and we say it, that's fine, it's coming from realization. But just repeating somebody else's experience has so little value. And the reason this point is important is because so many people, so many Dharma practitioners, they hear the words, and then afterwards they rest in some vague abstraction of, nature of mind is voidness. The nature of mind is beyond conceptual fabrication. They don't know what on earth it means, but they sit in some sort of vague state thinking that's it. So it's very important to understand the difference between their realization and our own, and the need to develop our own.
Kamabi tendi songandu tara, mabi tendi songandu a malaka tendi songangu tendi re lana yapu mandu. Tata karire dina kunamba ko toba re, nima ngarong ko toba mare. Ngarong ko toba da, ngarong ka sayang titu ni, ta toba tendi chisondu, nga toba tendi jindu se taki agandu dima, goma tangaji ko toba karire du si ki agamadu, to pe kachi borendu.
So it's the same point Rinpoche is stressing because it's so important. It's what they realized was their realization, what the Buddha realized, what the Mapa realized, what Milarepa realized, what the Karmapas have realized, and what they tell and what they write. What they were speaking of was what they discovered. That's what we need to do, not to repeat what they said. We need to speak about what we ourselves have discovered. And Rinpoche says very clearly that just to say, Marpa said this, the Buddha said that, Milarepa said that, is of no benefit. It's of no use. It's just words. What we need to say, what we need to express, is what we ourselves have discovered about the mind. So, as Rinpoche explained at the beginning, we do need to understand what they said. There's a difference between understanding what they said and simply repeating it in our minds. So we do need to understand, and then on the basis of that understanding, through the sort of text that we study, then we need to discover it for ourselves within our own practice. So in order to understand what they said, then we have texts like this one, which is called a sintri, which means an explanation text. If we turn now to the actual title of the text, then in the Tibetan it starts with the 4 syllables Chajja Jampo, which means Mahamudra. Although in the Tibetan it's Mudra Maha. The first word is Chajja, the Mudra, and the second is the Great. So this means the Great Seal, or the Great Gesture. And to understand something of what that means, then we need to understand that Mahamudra has 3 main aspects. There is Mahamudra as basis, Mahamudra as path, and Mahamudra as result. Of those, then the first is Mahamudra as basis, which we need to understand.
Korong ye domani donana nomba topi yehi dela kogavare korong chutanje go ronghi go rondong ta nomba topi yehi dela na ta yeshoje chenbo se kogavare chukatswa.
The basis Mahamudra is something which concerns not just oneself, not just something other, it's something that concerns, or that's true of absolutely every single phenomenon. And it is that everything has been since time without beginning, by its very nature, the clarity of total wisdom or primordial wisdom. On that basis, which is an understanding of the true nature of all things, everything has always been, since beginning this time, primordial wisdom, then on that basis we need to practice in a way that helps us to realize that, to make that real, realize in the sense of the word make real, to realize that for ourselves. In order to do that, we have many skillful methods. We have very much oral instruction from the lamas of the lineage, and we have various things like understanding the view, the meditation, and the conduct, which help us to practice the path.
Then, driva shaja chambo seje sa karinda uchi golere dinana di nipa malupa te thanji pa se ni 다 런지 니바다 제니 여도라 레지들라 고아래 여기도 야 레지들라나 되니더라 리버셔지 쳔볼란데 여기도 야 레지들라나 레지나 티티도 또 티티도라 레지.
And then the result Mahamudra is that through the path we remove every obstacle, every defect to a totally perfect recognition or realization of that basic nature. Once the recognition of that basic nature is 100% perfect, then we have the full result.
다더 베나가로 삐지거나 이게 shaja chenpo seje de karire sena pena rin rabo jina no 동보 리라 드마요 마라 두joyo 바 마라 리 다가보 인난다 세보 인난다 롱여 그런 거리고 롱여 가리거나 요파데 베나나 다 이게 shaja chenpo 세 다 드린다고 지라 고거래.
If we take an example for these three, basis, path and fruition, then for the basis, if we think of some cloth, some new cloth, and whether it's white cloth or yellow cloth, whichever one it is, then it has its nature as clean new cloth.
가르레지나 이라 드마요 말에 니바요 말에 더 베나 리 동보라 다 이 드만다요 든디요 말에 베나 든다고래.
Like a lovely piece of nice new cloth which is pristine and unstained and unspoiled.
드니너 롱 shaja chenpo seje 가르레지나 다 리니반라고 쳐 든디 세루나나 다 드마쳐 다 든디 요바레 드마 요바레 대요나는 리 코롱 그 취게 가리나 뒤좀 노롱도 바레 드마가 나본다고 쳐도 바레 대 나보 쳐노도 되라나 오니 리달라나 나보 다 사드 해와레 니바 사바치 쳐송와레 니 동보 든디 요바 마레 다 가롱 그 타시니 변나는 쳐동도 지라서 발라 떼니 다 추야 보지자 야보지 추요나 대트마다 파 로벌 쇼와레 파 너너와레 이게 고로 가래 요나가 보이나 가보 마보이나 마보 든디 해와레 들 해온지도 추통제 그 이라 드마 요바 마레 대연나용 로버드 해온지도 롱다 타 맹어 드니 다고쇼살라 떼니 드니 냥란 시온디디라 디 드마다 파 좀마시 다 든디 제지 달라나 더 롱쇼제 쳔보시 고아레.
If we use the same example for the path, then the path is like coming across a piece of dirty cloth, and you recognize, or you're helped to recognize, that it wasn't originally like that it can be cleaned up and be restored to its pristine, perfect original nature. So then you set about laundering it, you wash it, you take away the stains, you take away the dirt, and in the end the original pristine pure nature of that cloth will be attained. So like this, when with our minds, then we come to recognize that the mind isn't as it at first seemed, and that primordially its true nature, its original nature, is something utterly pure and perfect. And so through the oral instructions, the personal advice of our teachers, and through the various methods, then we take away those stains. And the key word about those stains is that they are only, if we use technical words, they are accidental or adventitious. In other words, they just come and go without affecting the primordial nature itself. They can be cleaned.
드니는 리버 shaja chenpo. 단 리버 shaja chenpo 세제도 가리리지나 비나 리그 디도라 드마더 파 너차나 리 코롱 다 동복가 보이나 가보 세부이나 세부 가리요나 가리요지도 파 누마다도 전와라 다 대엔다고도 로버가 드마싱오제도 람다 라마 맹어도 타 드니 gomba 따와 gomba 쇼바가 드니 라 땡니 이겨라요지도 파 응원 파 전와래 베나 가로서 드마트 드니 제디데라나 쵸건두 드니는 도지 건두 드니 그 가히 뭐지 메나 롱가비 코론티 드마피 메로 말이 된다고지 라메 맹어도 타 드니 타탈라 땡니 드니 디드마로 바 숑제더 카 좀아피 좀마시나나 드니 이게 코론 레 가리라고 jo나 드니 세부이나 세부 가보이나 가본다고 가리오나 가리 전도디와 베된다고 달라나 다 리버셔지 전부 라바레.
And applying the same example to resort Mahamudra, this is when the cloth has been restored to its pristine primordial condition. So if it was white or if it was yellow, then it's sparkling white or sparkling yellow, sparkling golden, just as it came out of the factory or wherever it was made. And so with the result Mahamudra, it means that through all of the skillful method, through the Lama's instruction, through understanding the view, through practicing the meditation, through applying the special advice about conduct, through all of those things, in the end, the timeless, eternal state of mind has been recognized and established perfectly as it always was. All of the passing stains of ignorance and confusion, not understanding, have been taken away. And if we think of the various methods we use for doing that, such as view, meditation, conduct, and the Lama's advice, then this is like all of the different things you need to do a really good laundry job. So you need stain remover for some things, you need detergent for other things, maybe some fabric softener or whatever it is. I'm adding a bit to the translation there. It didn't say fabric softener. So then you need all of these things in order so that in the end the cloth is utterly pure, as golden and as yellow as it could be.
이겨도 동보 따위 터지 거 말이 이겨도 가리 거 동보 바로 몬초 거 말이 등 뭐만 줘나 더니 변하는 리의 동보 다 까본다고 이난다 마보 이난다 더 이거 야부지 임바 마시나 이 점화도 로버도凶啊 하고 말이 그런 원나보이나 그런 나보이래도 되는 데만 이 거제도 오 저마다 로버바레 사드 송마레 인지 하고도 영마다 리 까보이나 까보레디오 송지 하고 그 더야보진 거 추가바레 던다고지 동부 이거 그런 거 쇼제 진보고 이게 세지도 다 주통하지 그 니서도 가리 뭐야보진 저근데 더 뭐히나 더니 당가로 냥래 야보지지 거야보지잖아 이 저마다 파더 던디 된 저마다 타나나 이게 가리 원데 요지도 전로바레 된디데라나 동부 여히 드니 달라는 냥랜시 감지 쇼바도 강니거 드니 본 쇼비 본다 드니는 강거 이게 세니 드니 리버도 마디야 보시졌던데.
The first thing we need to do is to, if we take the example of the cloth, to actually understand what its original state or its basic state is. I mean, if it was like a really dirty black piece of cloth, you need to understand that actually underneath all of that dirt there is a piece of white cloth or yellow cloth. That's one thing that needs to be understood. Another thing that needs to be understood is that the stains can be removed and that the dirt can be removed. And so in terms of our mind, first we need somebody to tell us, to introduce us to the mind, to let us know how it really basically is. We talk about the basis, we could say the basic state of mind, and this is called establishing the view, pointing out the nature of mind. Once we realize the nature of mind, which is like realizing, there's this pure white cloth under that, then we can set up, and that stains can be removed, then we can set about the process of removing the stains. So we go through the path, we remove our accidental, temporary illusions and habits and so on. And then in the end, through all of the process, there is the pure white cloth. But this first understanding what can be obtained and that it is obtainable is very important.
사고란다고도 돈이 요파래 가로 키려면도 쓰이나 체리비고 레면도 농비고 레면도 옛날에 차와 통지 뭐서서 바지 네 사고라요 저공지래 라요 바래 농바공 달라요 바래 변나 사 집었던 듯다발라 손도 동거는 체리비고 돈이 사도 라면도야 사도 로 동시 몽보라 갈래서 사도 저공서래 라도야 네 말어서 농비용 달라요 바래 변나 초몽보 쭈쭈쭈쭈쭈 갈래 로 동trang 처trang 버처래 니 드니 사도 쳐 드니조 제사 제처 제처래조 든디도 쳐도 히오 바래 든디 라요 바래 동이 든디 레디오 바 라요 말이 던다오디 이게 코로 든디 레요 말이지 로버도 배나 사쳐봐 노쳐봐 다버도 너는 드마 통제도 로버도 디 발란지라 해 말이지 코로 동이 드마 요바 말이 된다고 말로서 배나 뭐용 동부 누 라면 돼야 라리 말라나 제가 제바이선데 라고도야 라리나 초도 다다 냐다본데 엄마 냐 제방마 야야야 되는 냐다니 주고선데 된리라도 안 알아서 뭐야 대처로서 갖고 와래 대인데 돈이 뭐요 봐 라면 돼야 된다고리 로번도凶공제 다다 나로서 샤제 쳔보 관계하고 요 말이 라고 그래 이게 라요 말이 로버도 해고 말이 라요 말이 디 레버 로버도 해고 이제 야보지 하고나 되니 로버도 갈리파 네바쳐서나 되니 이게 가리오네 때라 되는 대바 dun하라서 봐도 로버도凶와이 막 하고 요 말이
If we take another example to give us some perspective on this, if we take the example of our planet, the Earth, then whether it be in terms of modern science or whether it be in the traditional Buddhist teachings, although the storytelling of it is different in the details, both of them say that our world didn't start off as we perceive it now, that a long, long time ago, way back, either it came out of space and then gradually the oceans formed and then gradually the continents formed and then life emerged from the oceans and bit by bit then we became humans and so on. Or there's the Buddhist version, which is not that different, about how first out of space there's the stirring of the wind element and then the wind element makes the water element move, and this sort of does some what's the word? Malaxing, is that English? I don't know. Anyway, beating up process on the ocean that makes the continents form. Whatever it is, we know that now, or even though it doesn't look like that, if you look at it, we know that the world didn't start out like this. It came out of nothing, and all of this emerged through a very, very long and complex history. We say now, from our science, for instance, that before there were humans, there were these sort of fish-like creatures that crept out of the ocean, and that we came from that. I mean, you wouldn't guess it unless you actually had the research or somebody who knew about it told you that we were fish, coming before. It doesn't look like that. So in this way, we can understand how there's a long process of evolution, of development. So when we first look at our minds and we see what is there on the surface, what is there at present, we might not have any idea of the pristine primordial nature from which it emerged, and how through the building up of so many things over such a long period of time, it's become concretized into what it is today. But once we do know this basic state, this primordial state, then this thing which has taken so long to develop into what it is just now, we can gradually work on it with skillful methods to deconstruct the illusion and return to that pristine awareness.
동보 매바다 다 지스 요바냐 띵아롱소 있나요 마롱고 나도 롱다버더 주니 되니 노아 카토마데 리효바레 디메나 무서 저송지 요바 말에 더 제디요데나 카토마라 뇽본다 요거레 디 베나나 라라라나 카와베 힘보지 요레 라라나 나와베 힘보지 요바레 라라나 카타모베 힘보지 뉘아 더자 롱롱롱 나도고시 롱롱롱고다 레이고 바래 생각 봐주고 바래 배나 라리가 다이나 라리가 조본다고 쳐디오래 라리가 빼 가보이나 라리 빼 먹아라고 쳐디오 바래 다 수세고 바래지나 예팅원라 저마 롱가 생각 나도고 쥐니 생각 나도고 파 로벌 파 세고 바래.
So just as in the first instance in the creation of the world, there's this stirring up of energies, and this stirring up of things gradually concretizes them into this and into that. Then in our minds there's been the stirring up of wind, of energy, and thoughts that accompany that, and these are gradually, bit by bit, concretize themselves into each and every one of our realities, our ways of perceiving things. And if we take simple examples, what is tasty food for one person is not tasty food for another person. one person's friend is another person's enemy. What one person thinks is really fantastic, another person thinks is really horrible. We have each our own perceptions, which have been, just like the universe, built up step by thoughts and energies and everything that they generate through their movement and interaction.
Pena nganda wujila no ta mujiga ngara zimushi o chu pa ma ponjo ka chwa no se chandu kha chandu lana nga tu ti la he se nga ngo chore se pe di bu chore kama ni so ge jila no o jo ni zimu ni cho ma re jina ha se nga ge chore nga jere re de yala yo ma re de nga ro ko dombo se dupu seji de ngarong ge sang xere jima ta hewa sa mandi yapun du song ji de ngarong ge sang xere ni ka ngarong sang xi go de de ji la na ngi ni la na ji de so ji ma sa ma du de le de wa de du nga nyu ji wo ma re de yan na yong ka chwa ngarong ge sang xi go re.
And I forgot to say before, and in particular, what becomes generated out of all of that is our happiness and our suffering. So to take an example, if somebody came and told Rinpoche, your parents, your brothers, your sisters, your whole family has been assassinated, then he said he'd probably break down and cry and be really, really upset. And if they come back 2 hours later and say, it was just a joke, they're fine, then, he says, then you sort of have a good laugh. I don't know if you would, but anyway, he said you'd have a good laugh. And if we take those two examples, then what is it that happens? It's not actually because of what's called the basis of something real that's happening. It's the mind. The mind, because of the way it thinks in the first place, becomes totally distressed. And then the way it thinks 2 hours later, it has a good laugh, a joke. It's gone to the other extreme. What does that? It is thought, simply thought, that takes the mind here and there.
다 대화도 동화 카 통화도 생각해요 봐 하고 되니 다 생각하리리 다 대라년련시 딘디시 원하는 되니 대화도 동화 카 통화도 니선다고 야보지 하고 니선다고 또다 딘디시로디 대라는 생각해요 봐 임바 하고 대라년련시지도 다 농바송집이 체슈진난다 다
So then one comes to understand the way the mind works, the way that the thoughts act upon the mind, the way the mind generates happiness and suffering. And this is really a key point of Lord Buddha's teaching. It's just to help us understand this way the mind is, the way the mind operates. The way that one thing provokes another, especially in terms of happiness and suffering.
손도 주소가 지라는 샤라 요바래 자세지 가리되나 쇼리메 바라 쇼리메 바라나 얘나 나로 소라지나 조동 요바래 쇼리 요바래 나 교세들이 요래 콜라 쇼리메 바래 너 두포레 ndalana 동바도 얘기 요바 말이 너 야포 요래 ndalana 동바 얘기 요래 세고 근데 요바마 추카 총알라 제바지 좀 라본다 좀 냥도 요바래 대인들이 자세지도 쇼리메 발라 고아리 근데 동녀도 예히데 카 통화는 잡본다 좀 요바 되니 첨보세지도 가리는 고리를 라나나 딜이 문다바 카 통화데 디롱게 봐 근데 제디들라나 다 쇼자 첨보세지 그 티여디 다 동도 근데 좀 내가 나용데 줘바래.
If we return to these first 4 syllables of the title, then they're being explained, and we have to do this through the Tibetan, otherwise it would be too complicated. So in Tibetan, Mahamudra is Cha ja, chenpo, cha-ja chenpo, 4 syllables. And the first is cha, which means seal, or mudra. And this word takes on profound meaning when it doesn't just mean seal or mudra. It's imputed with deep meaning, and that meaning is that of voidness and primordial wisdom. That's what's understood by the cha, and the fact that voidness and primordial wisdom are totally inseparable. There is no voidness that is not wisdom. There is no wisdom which is not voidness. That's the cha. Ja is imputed with the meaning of no bias. So, as regular beings, we have preferences, we have biases. Some things are good, some things are bad, some things are friends, some are enemies. Just a second. But in the primordial mind, in Mahamudra, then, and in fact within this union of voidness and wisdom, everything is the same. There is no better and worse, good or bad, greater or smaller. Everything is recognized as being of similar nature. So it's beyond bias. That's ja. And then chenpo, which means great, means there is nothing other than this. This is not some special state. It embraces everything. Other than that primordial wisdom in which everything is the same, there is nothing else. And it is, because of that, the nature of all things. In fact, in the text describing Mahamudra in Sanskrit or Chajachempo in Tibetan, there is an awful lot said about these 4 syllables by way of inflating them with meaning. But this will suffice for this talk.
Di nondang da wuje go na uni teka jatame na yo nondang da wo pa je go ji yo bare di da jintian de xin di nondang da wo ji ina na teka korong ka gare la yo na pa je go ji yo ni yo re tin di sha ja la je de da teka je go zo ma re nondang pa je go zo bo ko lo za wa mi de do yo bare 인지 올라는데 마하만다 라디와 아야 디 마하의 첨부 신들이더라 뜻이란데 이게 맞지만데 마타 라제도 샤자가 동담 자태가 전화 말이 자태가 전화 문다와라 고아래 문다와 띵옹리 문다와 코로 통치 디롱이래 디오지 띵옹리 코로 나마요 봐 마타 히비다디 문다위 동나 유바래 되면 샤자세 세면데 얘는 보고로 잡아대 통치 자더 코론소고 다자 사발리고 말이 이거 저도 샤자세고 된디서 또 이거 말이 되면 운이시 파테카잖아 마타히 바다디 만다와 라소바이 다겐바라 뉴디 더용다 대속고나용 오래 샤자라지도 보고 오래 다시 동지레디오 바다 온고나용 야본유가 돼도
It's a linguistic point, but it's interesting to know that when Mahamudra was translated into Tibetan, then when translating terms like that, the translators have 2 choices really. Either they make a literal translation of the word, or else they make a meaning translation, where they choose another word which isn't a literal translation, but which conveys the meaning. And this is what they did with the mudra part. Mahamudra, maha means great, that's not a problem. But the mudra, they didn't translate directly. They gave this word chaja, which means seal, because they felt that conveyed the inner meaning. It conveyed the real the feel of the term. If it had been translated for its meaning in Sanskrit, that meaning in Sanskrit is not beyond. If we take it literally, so that means all-encompassing. There is nothing which is other. There is nothing which is beyond this, other than this. So it's the great all-encompassing, not the great seal. The great nothing other. So they chose to use this word chaja, which means seal. Then the next term in the Tibetan is Lenchik Jejor. Some translators keep this in the Sanskrit, so you'll see Sahaja Mahamudra. And then these days many people use this terrible term co-emergent, which I don't like, but you'll see it in many books. And it means simultaneous, innate. There's a technical term which doesn't sound nice, but it's correct, which is connate. It means that things are simultaneous and inseparable, but they don't emerge from anywhere or go anywhere. So Lenchik Jejor means, Rinpoche explains, that mind's intelligence and voidness occur simultaneously and inseparably. The voidness and the intelligence about that voidness cannot be separated. It's not like milk and water, where you can pour them together, but it's a mixture of milk and water. It's not like that. It's totally inseparable. There's no way to distinguish the one from the other. Or we can add three things to a third thing. We can say the primordial intelligence, the voidness, and the clarity of manifestation all occur simultaneously.
Dona karinda ujena chusando demba. Lenchi si zoro se jetala chusando den jimba ingware. Ripa sawa tomba moya ta sando den.
So in fact, if we want to retain in our minds a definition of this term, sahaja, then we should remember that there are three simultaneous things: intelligence, clarity, voidness.
This sound I also must understand don jalo sandaboji denditaboji mayimba pena chesan ligo bata pena no ripa yona sawa tomba niyoba tomba yona yu dala yu ripa sawa niyoba sawa yona sawa la ripa don tomba yu yoba ta dendi bare.
Although simply to be able to express it, we have to use three terms. We have to say intelligence, clarity, voidness. These aren't three things. It's not like three people, three objects, three whatever it may be. They are really totally inseparable.
Pena Perigona, Ser Yaputab, Se on Tombo Yapuji, La Chusano de Opare. Carinda Ujirelana, Se Cadu Sebore, Chuchi. Maya, Teni, Jugu Chimbore, the Chuchi, the Chuni Chosma. Then you say, Tap troubles of the Gona, Corum Mela saw, Tenisi gonna pa, Duru Roger Merisela. Mela saw Carisi gonna Corum Sega, pa Duru the window, Pena, Nandawina, Mela saw gonna Coru Durundo Mebachonore. Say and Rawina, Mela saw that Tenisi got the shit Tenisi gonna pa Duru Mondopare. The Nidawina, de Corum. Say, Tila, Pena, Dinoni Cadu Sebo the Pale. Jiguta about the Zule. On a pa, Durin Roger Meji Tula, Cassandra would you say, Mera? Say, Chujuana, Coron Sankaton Diore, say Chujuana Sankaton Diore. Say about the pal and Jiguta about the Zule, Coronti Durin Roger Meji Pal and Passage Mary, Coronca. You had the Catsuan the Tondore. Thunderwater, Ripa, Tomba, Sava, Sankata, Donan Tonson Gilana, and she's or Roladu.
If we take an example for this, then if we think of gold, we can say gold has three qualities, three aspects. First, there's its, and then we say very pure gold. Very pure gold. It has, first, its golden colour. That's one thing. Another thing it has is its heaviness. Real, very pure gold is very heavy. You can think, that's gold because it really weighs down in your hand. Third quality is immutability. It's not like many other things, like this wooden table in front of Rinpoche. You could burn this table and it would just be a pile of ashes in the end, be nothing left. You burn gold, nothing happens. It's changeless, it's immutable. But can you separate those things? Could you take the colour and put it here? Separate from the weight and put it there, separate from the immutability. Could you just ever isolate one thing without the other two? Of course not. They're just three qualities of the gold. And so what I didn't say earlier on, it's a bit of a brain twister, was that if we take the intelligence and the clarity and the voidness, then you can't just have the intelligence without the clarity and the voidness. You can't just have the clarity without the intelligence and the voidness. You can't just have the voidness without the intelligence and the clarity. You've got to... They all are three inseparable aspects.
Tendina, Shwaja Chambo Sejeto, Henki Shizo Sejetini, Darling Samadu, Kahan Sadu, Shwaja Chambo, Jinchi, yes. Henji Jizu, Jinche Yos on Lamatamba Tangi Tenisundu, Jinche Yos. Shwaja Chambola Jinche me, Tenisundu, Kahare, Yamada was over. Tatu to Chiba injury, Ta Nikala Kahare, Madapare. Penny Karinda Kahare, Lanano, Shwaja Chambu, Tangaroso, Nua Shiva, Topa Shiva, Ka, Tomata, Ta, Henji Shizoro. Chitonchi Rongi, the number near the park, Joasi Patinilan, Henki Shizore, Tina, Topartonji Pam, Verjon Semi, Dona, Hua Conga, Toparte Tonchina, Shoja Chambo Pa, Pichizi, Sejiti, Delani Colis and do. Then he, Yoda, that Shoja Chambo Chodi Opera. The other Kanda, Gua Lambicasla, the other Mandabanda would eat that, it is a language.
The Chaju Champo Dan Chaju Champo the Junche
Champo Jinchemi, Lanchi Jinche Yo, so only. And you repat on Jet, Dona the Chukar Joy, Shepa City Tira. Chukar Jo Donana, Jo Sadi Jichemi Bachondovara. The Metatombi Castle, Joti Yomarka, Joti Yoraka, Joti Mary, Lanchi the Jordan, the Kaka Jotamandi, Tina, Jichi Opana Chondovara, Tindi Tirana, the Etoji, Matapana, Gualian Galiza. So
if we find, what can we use for a word for this sahaja? Let's say simultaneously occurring, or you can think co-emergent if you really need to, simultaneously emerging, and Mahamudra. These are the first two words of the title. And although the one describes the other, they're not quite the same. Mahamudra is continuous. Actually, the Tibetan word means never broken, unbroken. Mahamudra is unbroken, and simultaneously occurring is not continuous. So we need to understand the meaning of these terms. Mahamudra is the basis of everything. It's the primordial nature. It's never interrupted. It's eternal, always was. That's one thing. But this simultaneously occurring applies to what happens every instant with mind's manifestation and experience. Mahamudra, the eternal basis, occurs simultaneously with this, occurs simultaneously with that. Every second it occurs simultaneously, but that simultaneous occurrence comes and goes. As the perception of mind, the experience comes and goes. Mahamudra itself, this timeless basis, doesn't change. So there's a difference between Mahamudra and Sahaja, or simultaneously occurring. We'll just take a 30-second break for the CD to be changed. Takes only 30 seconds. It's a marvelous process. So, the next word in the title is an explanation. Simply means that it's explaining how to do Mahamudra, what not to do. Just like any explanation tells you the mistakes to avoid and what to do. Just taking advantage of what just happened to make an example about explanations, and he's saying, if we talk about space, it's a bit difficult because in Tibetan the word for space and the sky is the same. So, if we say space, then we point up and everyone sort of, space. In fact, space is everywhere. We all point up and everyone knows what it means, but space is everywhere. The next word in the title is a written explanation. Written explanation, and this simply means that we're given some pithy words, some very concise words, which help us remember or anchor the meaning in our minds. A sintri is usually a short text that takes us to the heart of the matter and gives us verses that help us to remember the subject matter. The next words in the title are the lamp that illuminates the essence. So this text, this work, or Mahamudra itself, is the lamp which illuminates the very essence or the essential nature of all phenomena.
더 세지도 저 세지더니 동카가래 라면도 더 세지도 다 가리래 라나너 바치 시게지라고 하래 바라 가리 바치 시레 라나너 체수 라소발라 니가라 다 체도 수다 네라소바시니 체도 수라용 바르디 조바시바동 다 다든다고지 손노동 다 어떠면 니가라 다 데발라 소바도 다 노나너 르롱쇼 가리나 대통제라 바디 조바 대통제라 고아리 니가 다 다든라지나 타바동 타바토 마지바도 어야 드니 통제 챵바 송지주 공부 토 마지바 대 통제라 바 바디 조바시 비거 더 라레 더 지나는 두저치라 건디 바드 쪽에 바 가리지를 되나 니가 돈 다디 대완 좀 마지비 더 라레.
The next few words in the title are it's like the quintessence of the nectar, and heart essence of the nectar. It's like you take a nectar and then you process it so you get the nectar of the nectar, as it were. And the word for nectar in Tibetan is dutsi. And dutsi has two syllables, and the first of them is du, which is the Tibetan word for mara. It means something which creates obstacles. And so the first syllable means obstacles, all sorts of obstacles, obstacles to life itself, obstacles to health, obstacles to happiness. These are the sort of the worldly obstacles. And then in terms of spiritual practice, there are obstacles to us gaining freedom, liberation of the mind, and then us gaining total enlightenment, which is more than the freedom. So there are all sorts of things, which we call maras, which present obstacles either to worldly happiness or to liberation and ultimate happiness.
타동 맹어라 소발라 때니 디 바조 대통제 파 인정바시바 디 쯔다라나 다 들리고아래.
The second syllable of dutsi is tsi, and this means to overcome. So it's what overcomes the obstacles, what defeats them. And then in terms of the practice, these are the various methods that we employ. It's the direct advice of our gurus, which helps us to overcome those various obstacles on different sorts of levels.
단 처음에 봐 가리를 나나는 우수가 네가 제도수 다디 타바도 통진 쳔바라 바죠 제가 파 총아 메바시 판정선은 통진 쳔바도 공부 토로 바래 대이나 통진 쳔바라 혀세지 메레 처음에 봐 공부 토로 바래 더다 더절라지도 가갈라 치메시 다 든디세 오는 처음에 봐 공부 가리 토로를 되는 디 바죠 카총아 메바니데 정 판정선이라는 치메 혀바 당신 집이 공부 돈도 말해. 다다공 치매세 온데서 들리선 되는데.
Then I forgot before. So there's an example. If we're sick, we have an obstacle to health, and so medicine overcomes it. So like that, to overcome the various obstacles to our own path of practice, to liberation, to omniscience, then we have all of these methods and good advice. And the word for dutsi in the text that we often have in our mantras is amrita. And that amrita, that word amrita, when it's explained, is what leads us to the deathless state. And the sort of amrita that we're requesting or seeking in the practice is what takes us in the end to the omniscience of the primordial mind, And so when one reaches that state, because it always was, it has no birth, no death, it is the deathless state, it's like the ultimate nectar of deathlessness, because in order to attain that, all of the various obstacles that make worldly existence and its problems and the obstacles on the path have to be overcome. And this isn't just amrita, it's not just nectar. This is the quintessential essence of nectars. And this word ninku, you find it in Tibetan medicine, where you have a whole process of boiling stuff up, refining it down, and so on and so forth, until you get the very, very essence of something. So there are many teachings of Lord Buddha which help us to overcome obstacles, to gain omniscience, to gain liberation. Mahamudra is like the heart essence of all of them. It stands out. It is totally outstanding as a method for achieving the omniscience, for overcoming the obstacles. It's like the essence of the essence of the essence. It's like the nectar of the nectar of the nectar.
Benana, Shoja Chambo, Zopa Chambo, Oma Chambo, Sato Sunjula Sopago, Tondo Jimbara, Mimandapa Momboto, and the Obari. The Rig no yo, Ta, Shoja Chambo, says to the Chuka, says in the Neo, Tonki, Miganon race, the Neo, Gelalano, Lamalala Sondu, Ta, Tonki, Miganon, Sienada, Nona Chutanji, Neru, Chuka, Inada, Ta Telana, Zumujugoni, Ta, Upon the Juri, Sevo, Ta, Pangoto.
Then we come in the title to the word that's most usually given for this text, which is pointing to the Dharmakaya. Pointing to the Dharmakaya. So the pointing means, in Tibetan, it's putting your finger on it. Or it's like when we just simply take a finger and say, it's that. That's it. Just as in regular life, it's that obvious and that clear. Somebody says, it's that. So in this way, there's a very clear pointing to something, introduction to something, which is here, Dharmakaya. If we take the word literally, Dharmakaya, Dharma means things, it means phenomena. So we can say, this is pointing to the nature of things. It's pointing to the nature of all things. That nature is what? It is voidness, it is a state, it is a transcendence of thought, it's what's called beyond conceptual complication, beyond what we can think. And we can give endless names. We can say Mahamudra, we can say Dzogchen, we can say the union of clarity and voidness, we can call it also the great middle way. There are really endless names for this one simple thing, which is the nature of everything. So here we call it Dharmakaya, and this text is, or Mahamudra is pointing us to that Dharmakaya.
Deni ngoto pa yu so. Ta ne no la sishani ta ngondo ni ngugi jiba de nona ne mombo chi so ba re. Re de ta zawa ngama da garere de na ngoto na bo de. 다 ngoto la nino manda pa mombo yo re ngoto mombo chi so re 얘나용 또 쯔두거나 뭐 니오래 니거라 가래되나 나로서 이열동 예잼세고다 너무 니세요 바리 시샤가 나로서 다 이열지 예잼세다 너무 니오 바리 다 대라 때니 니노라용 뭐도 니오래.
The last term in this title is an introduction to. The word is often translated as also pointing out or being introduced to. And although in this text, which is a complete system of Mahamudra, there are many stages. There are the preliminaries, or the various foundations. After that, the actual practice, which has in fact many stages of pointing out or introduction to the nature of mind. There are many different steps, many bits of advice, but they can be resumed, they can be summarized in two main areas. The actual pointings out concern either the object or the subject. We can say mind as object, mind as subject. And then for each of those there are many details.
다 가린다고 지어래 라나나 니는 동보 생고되고 바래 동보 다 예제 다 가로서 생세지 다 가린다고 지누세가 생더 동봉고 저시요 바래 대 생지 원초 차지 원초 차지 디니는 다 생가 노와다 다 라마다 리디도가 가로서 노와다 너 원초 시요 바래 되니 생 노아니 마도 되니 개마 치고 말해 뒤거나 지 싫어세거나 생라용 지 노히 다초제 나와냐 히자 몸보스 노지 세진데 열리나 용 주다 저로 담다 몸보스 세진데 디 뒤거나요 다 생도 노아니 되요 말해 되니나 동보 생이야 보진디 농고 되요래 디 기절을 생이 샤와 노안도 가진다고 지리래 세고 못 되요 말해 더 못도 뒤거나 니노라 못도 니요래.
If we take these two aspects of introduction to our mind or pointing out the mind, then the first is the subject. We call it the subject. Actually, in the Tibetan, literally, it's what holds the object. That means the subject. And so that's the mind. And so the first great pointing out, with all of its details, is to help us understand our mind, to be introduced to recognize the mind. And then once the mind has been well recognized, then the next great area of pointing out is what the mind experiences, the mind's objects, all of the things we see, hear, and so on. Anything that can manifest to the mind, having once recognized what the mind is, then we recognize the nature of mind's experiences. And of course, they come down into many details. When we think the mind, what is the mind? It has consciousness. It has consciousness. It has cognition. It has all sorts of subdivisions inside it. When we think about what it experiences, there are things to see, things to hear, things to smell, things to taste, things to touch. There's the various senses which experience them. Many, many details. But put simply, coming to understand reality means understanding one's mind and then going on to understand mind's experiences.
다 대하는 니 생각한다고도 희사송.
그래서
옛날용 다당하롱 희에지더 다 저제 첨부 현지 시조시 처리신지 생각한다. 치그고니 다 희가 말해. 우니 다 당지고니 희에 된디 세그나 동보 모टे 드니 모टे나 드니 너 느리레세고 생라리리리 자니 생가 노안도 다바 샤공지다 느리레세 맹어지고니 생가티도 니리리리 근데 희게가 말해. 레데 마로소 다 모토 요 제나만노 모토 토요지레데 다 데리카스 바바 온도 또나 ngoto leo mare tono. Ngodi man rohiore, the inana, Sagatidoni, Tandelindri se on and Trisi to Casamaba Barindu. The Dirananda, Chigoni, non and Hijana, Tata di Jetonda Udre, the Meta Tomji going in the Hiji Ganana, Shoja Chambo, Sijoro, Sejigata, Tasana, Topa Haton, Troton, Tandelisi detail and the mean, the Pazani, Muni Moto, Mote, and his Hatuni, no Agatidu, Miangotigoni, the little their Jetonki over theatre. Tata Casapamadi, Maros no Tata Somere, the Menatary Pedumadi.
Well, that concludes the title of the text and the meaning of the various words. And what we did was to go through this term by term and to explain each of those terms using concepts so that they make some conceptual sense. This is one way of doing it. There's a second way that can be applied all through this text and can be applied to this title. And that second way is not on the basis of terminology, it's on the basis of inner meaning or direct experience. In order to do that, first one needs the direct experience of the recognition of the nature of mind. And maybe some have, some haven't. But anyway, certainly in this course we didn't get there yet. We only just started, and we're just looking at the title. But if there were this second way of approaching the title, then we go back to those first words, Mahamudra, and explain Mahamudra in terms of the experience we just had, or we're having, and saying, however it would be said, Mahamudra is this. This simultaneously occurring wouldn't be just blah, blah, blah. It would be showing how that profound experience happens simultaneously with all things, and so on for each of these words, how it's a lamp which illuminates things. We'd go through a second level of understanding which would be profoundly intimate and real. But we didn't get there yet, so that was just the word explanation.
Carrera Tatangi Tombolaya, Tando, Onsu Doji Masore, Onsu Doji Nyonore, Naro Nyon Mare, Sina, Tangaroga, Sagatido Montro Gon, Tatanisidina, then Lamayo Nyon, Lomayo Nyon, Tangaroso, Sagatido, the leader was in Dua, Tata, Shore, then he Sagatido gone in the leader was in Dua, the Jari, then that Chambo said that the Dizzy, then you Agatido, Sagatidoni, so Roro Goitidoni. Yogare, Noyate, Paki don't Siena, Lama Lanyon Yapu Yogandu, Loma Gongo Yapon Togandu, then into another, then in Yon Kituni, then the Jajin, and the Higanoni, Tayakunda water, that Mengot Laga, then got you, Zonki that tender, that turn Lama Romanyan, Pompon Yapu Gong.
So that second way of doing things depends on what's called Mga in Tibetan, which means it's usually translated as oral instruction or personal advice or heart-to-heart instruction, heart-to-heart advice. And so what we've been doing here, as Rinpoche explained at the beginning, we are looking at Ninth Karmapa Wangchuk Dorje's realization. That was his realization, based on which he wrote this title. And we're looking at what he said and examining it. If we were approaching it in the second way, then both the teacher and the students would have had some profound experience of the nature of mind. And then in intimacy, then the teacher would go back to this Chadja Chenpo, how this, the all-encompassing, and then we'd be actually sharing experience. He'd be saying, this all-encompassing, and you'd be there, yeah, all-encompassing, and we'd be actually exploring it on the spot, really.
Then in Guarana, the 산다고도 요지 그 산다고도 넘바 선요래 해요래 배나 온보라라고 지나나 안딘 산 고래도니 오 노라 리리리 다 그만데 가서만 오다 샤제 챔버레데 샤제 챔버 코로 또 되어래 고되어래 다간디 차례 가서만 요도 하고르데 다가 아토버레 아니 온보린다고 지나 오래 난도래 만디야 난 누가 호그는 샤제 챔버레디야 선지기 너무 가리 Then you like Ramada Mombondu, Garnish to me, Tinicacore, Umbonjimochina. Then you open Tamas into Inayon, Shashan Chichi, Kaku, Lana Koyaka, Tandila Tigon, Tanda, Isadus, Koro Kakini, depending on in Hakumadi, Pentoyore, that Pento Umbola Tiani, Pento Mandaba Sandra, what you need, Ningola, Tagazi, and what did do.
It's traditional to explain the titles of texts. And it's said that they have a threefold benefit depending on the three types of person who read the title. For those of, so they're called the best, the middling, and the all right, let's say. Not to be... Anyway. So for the very best, then this will be somebody with Mahamudra realization. And they read this title... Oh yes, the pointing out of the Dharmakaya with the essence of this and that. They wouldn't need any more. Once they've read the title, they wouldn't even need to read the text. From the title itself, they've got the whole thing. They understand what it's about. That's the best, but this requires somebody of very, very deep and high realization. For the middling type of person, they read the various words of this title, how it's expressed, and Mahamudra, simultaneously occurring, the lamplit in. So they think, all right, of the sutras and the mantras or the Vajrayana, then this is a Vajrayana text. In the Vajrayana, yes, this fits in this slot. Bit by bit, they can decode the title to see where this fits in the scheme of things in the various teachings. And then the all right person, the third person, would need to get out books and the dictionaries and think, Mahamudra, and they'd need to study it and think about it and work it out, and gradually, bit by bit, they'd understand also something very, very useful. Each person gains a benefit, but in quite different ways, depending on how learned they are and how much inner realization they have.
Tani tarika la nga shaja chenpo andi chukan zitu zo hini tani langtong go nong ni zo ngozo go nga chili me zo sanzong do go chi sanzong no dong dong da tani nino yoba ka chwa da发现小些过程做引起的，小些用看俺种地那引起的这样的，马上还过去面的，等你像我说查找引呐，他偏头写了，电视偏头有那么些面那么些俺还过去面，像我马上把引呐，电视俺种个人吧偏头有几人俺种这样的，像我说些的累了不得的嘛的。ndo tsudi na ngi khasong la de kono la yi pe na akon rombo chera chi ta khasong ga pe ndichi ure kha ko ndu mo yamba chi akon rombo che mare la na yo ta ka ni ndo akon rombo chire so azin da wo chi ngaro ga sen ga ngo shwa je chen bo de song ji kha cha ta ba de le on mare la na yo kono go ta dong dong da wo ji yamba ka re song ni ten de ma do ngoni nga re mong ga song ji ji me ji ji la ngo cho se ji de ji cho ga re 뭐야 든지 오거든 이제 자요 그래 든지 요 성소지 공소지 있나 든지 나 편도 싫어 요 뭐히 든지 면看다 파생 인지래 다 파생 저번도 상看저거 기타마도 있나 다这个车子这个편도 돼서 용지 요지래 나로 그 텐데 엄마라마 통제 그다我做的某某든지 저 차차 요지래 대我做车呢 ngati loba ji khonji de phesu chero zo la kai sabaji yo ji mari tani na hini gong tong do san de song no tong tong de shwa je qian bong nu dong gari xie ge nu di guo de xie cha ji chena dang hao lama no de li xie cha zo xie ro che wo sam de ga ro zhen du de xi chena 대저 패도요나 지king 아롱 거 땡이 되나는 다리 가서라 ngo조的 맞吧 等你心的等你传统个三上弄动的这马龙个这一些别这些那马龙吃点有
So Rinpoche is making clear what he's going to do and what he's not going to do in this course. We've seen the title of this text is about the Mahamudra, and the title is about pointing out the Dharmakaya and so on. Actually, within this text and within the practice, there is quite a lot about preparing oneself, about shamatha meditation, settling the mind, and then in the insight meditation, there's ways of holding the mind, and then the pointing out of the nature of mind in many different steps and what follows. Rinpoche, in this course, will not be doing anything from the pointing out onwards. What he will be explaining, he says, as well and in as much detail as he can, is everything up to the pointing out, which is especially about the shamatha and about ways of working with the mind which help us towards that recognition, but not the pointing out the recognition in itself. He says here he doesn't really know because he doesn't know us, but he would imagine, or it seems, that there are some people who are familiar with the Mahamudra teachings, who practice them, and who already got maybe to the point of recognizing the true nature of mind. And maybe there are many who haven't got that far. So for those who have recognized the true nature of reality or of their minds, then maybe these teachings will be of some benefit, maybe not. He doesn't really know, he hopes so, anyway. But for those who haven't got to that stage of recognizing the true nature of reality, then he really hopes that these teachings about working with the mind, preparing it, settling it, doing various ways of holding with the mind and looking at the mind, which take us close to that pointing out, he hopes that will really be of benefit. He says in the past, then about the pointing out, he said this meaning of the pointing out is what? He gave the example recently when we were in the retreat, men's retreat together. And he said, everybody here knows Akon Rinpoche. Or I assume everybody here knows Akon Rinpoche. So if Akon Rinpoche was here and somebody pointed and said, that's not Akon Rinpoche, you wouldn't have any doubt in your mind. You've known him for years. You say, come on, that's Akon Rinpoche. I know for sure, there's absolutely no doubt. Recognizing the true nature of mind is like this. By the time one's finished with all the different steps, there can be no doubt. Whatever comes up, whatever is said, whatever comes up in one's own mind, there is absolutely no doubt that is the nature of mind. Just as if somebody says, that's not Akon Rinpoche, you just say, because you know. So this pointing out has been done in this center and in other places that you've been to by various great lamas. Rinpoche doesn't feel it's either the right time or his duty here to do that for us. But what he thinks is really, really valuable is everything that's in this Ninth Karmapa's text that takes us up to that point.
tani dansa ko noni akari tere la na no ni yan lo je pa song tong ya tani no ge nian song tong tani ge nian do ge so xero che pa xero me re ka chwa ni kan da bo re de ni no la ge so yong ma yong do ge so ki go so ka ki yo ban da tani na ge so ko don ba ya tani to tombo len du kare zo len go samba kare zo kyo go tani song je kare zo song go domba kare zo me pa chwa ro hindu tani chwa song na ta kare da wo xie gen du tani domba la ka su pyeong yo re se je ti ko nga ki tani ngaroso khatswa go shongji sanji domba mobo hehiore sanjal pha to gre se mobo ngaroso la hiore de inana di domba karizo to hiyo karizo hyogo de domba kariso go se de hi de ngaroso mobo hyo go nyale mobo se hiore corona domba sonji ore de inana go domba karizo to hiyo de karizo songo sonje karicha songo se di sonje ta cha yong hili di hieje ta tsawa ngamata ta hi indi me yalo ta hi gana te so ngaro so mere di me tsawa ngamata din tsa ye no la ya po song tene yalo no te so le la bo choro du de nan di tsawa da wo ta song ji ga tsawa da wo di me ngaro so te so mere de nan ta hi le yi ni chen ba no pe so na chen ba gong re ma pe so na chen ba gong re de ni ga se pe de ni re na na ni re yo ni re me na te so ji ya po man du ngaro chen du 가르레 지나는 송지 장대那个宋东等用키바 몸보고 송고노라 추르 기게等这些呢야포 요바 말에 송도 가르레세 화제도 변나 동보 추르지 해주되라 평양 침모요래 디 평양 더 변나 물리지 토노와래 물리 토바 연나용 다온 제 요지더라 니바요래 대 주를 제준로나는 디 물로도 세 통통다고 오면나 내 모한다고 오면나 바주 몸보체 뭐야 다 든지 이래 와래 송고 무슨 말어서 처음에는 뭐지 그 대망은 대바 로라 중저 그 지지월에 디노라 몸보송 바래 대인나는 더니 해차나나 맞이나 야본데 더니 디소메 용을 내가 제가 뭐 요나요 더니 제거서 더니 저 점이라 해가듯이 뭐냐 더니 저로서 저한테 이거는 저하고 이 디소 만디 더니 셔도라 danse 뭐니 마이거이.
The other topic of this course will be about, well, what's the best word? Vows, commitments. The actual word is dompa, domsik. If we look at it in another way, it means what connects you, what keeps you connected. It means what binds, what connects. So then we're going to be looking at those. First, there are what are called the vows or commitments for personal liberation, and here we'll look at the 8 main precepts that we observe and that lay people can observe, and their benefits and so on. And then something that's in its basis quite similar, but with some additions, how those lay precepts then become novice ordination, and then novice ordination, how that then that goes on to full ordination. We'll be looking at how those vows are taken, what their benefits are, what it is that breaks them, what it is that preserves them, how if they've been slightly broken they can be repaired, and so on. We'll be looking at those various aspects of the basic precepts of Buddhism, from refuge, through the lay precepts, through the monastic precepts. And then in the past we've all had many teachings about bodhicitta, about living as a bodhisattva, and we have probably a very good idea of the feeling or the notion of that, but then the actual bodhisattva vows tell us in more detail how to live that out, what we need to be careful of doing, what we need to be careful of not doing, so that our noble bodhisattva intention can be very properly fulfilled, how we can maintain both the intention and the practice. And then beside that, we've also, most of us, received Vajrayana empowerments. We do Vajrayana practices, and each one of these comes with its particular commitment or bond that connects us, keeps us connected with the practice. And so we'll look also briefly at the root samaya or commitments of Vajrayana. These teachings on commitments, on vows, are all there to help us, because they will help us for as long as we're being born and reborn in worldliness. it's the vows which bring the good qualities, because the vows prevent us from doing harmful actions, and they help us to nurture what is positive. And so through maintaining these commitments, this bond with what is intrinsically good and wholesome and profound and true, then we are nurturing what brings good life, happiness, good health, and all of those things. It's very, very important. And so Rinpoche hopes that this will be some use. Of course, it's some use if it's explained. Then on the basis of that explanation, something is put into practice, because then there's a real benefit. We have a very precious human existence, and to receive brilliant guidance and then not put it into practice is a bit of a waste. But if we can put it into practice, then it's very beneficial. So this morning's session is well advanced. There isn't time to start the teaching on the vows itself, but Rinpoche invites your questions about these or any topics. You can ask about anything you like, but please make it very concise. Not lots and lots of words and ideas, because that takes a lot of time, and then to answer all of those takes a lot. So focused questions, but about anything.
The Kaya, Dharmakaya, I'm confused now, because there's the Dharmakaya, Dharmakaya, and Sabodakaya, and then there's this Kaya, a different kind of Kaya. So what are we talking about? I mean, I know what the translation is, but is it a different Tibetan word?
Diginana chukuzubso. The chukumato the lonku chukuge sungju yamare cheki de junsen kare. Pena data ge nangwa chuku.
Yeah. Pena no nyamado mote gona nyami se de mote gamare. Nyamala se ronhyu ore. Chuka de moncho sona lonku chakani ronhyu gutala le diore. Oh yeah. To se gona na pena nyama khakosadu nyamala se yore se kamadu se de ronhyu hirore pe de tendawre.
Well, in this instance, it's pointing out the Dharmakaya, but that doesn't mean to the exclusion of the other Kayas. It means the other Kayas are included in Dharmakaya. And Rinpoche gives the example of the sun. It says if we are introduced to what the sun is, then later on the sunbeams and what they do and so on and so forth is details coming out of that. The main thing is to know where all that light comes from. So like that, the Dharmakaya is we can say the heart nature of mind, and then all of the rest of it, Sambhogakaya, Nimanakaya, happens because of that, the way it is. Yes. Yeah. Indeed.
I didn't quite understand the difference and similarity between Mahamudra and simultaneously emerging. Can you clarify that?
The Chaja Chenpo Dan Linchi Jejo, the Junche Dan Junche Mege, Yang Chachi Shero Namuchela Tetsakomaso.
Yeah. Shaja Chenpo le Jinche Me la Jeta Niso Jani Kepaimada.
So?
Hanchi Sijor the Jinche Yolere la Jeta Penano Niso Li Nisata the Mari Paon Noman Trena Jinche Chonobari. Tin Noata Manche Seji Retasuna. When the Hanchi Sijo Noata Penano Usu Ripa Sava Tomba Roti, here's one. The Ninda Wuchi Garon, you can know the really Tonsuna. The Jinche Mebachondovare. The Marina go get the Joe Madonna. We should tend to Joe Madonna, then Jinche Yobachondovare. The is I do.
So the question is about the first two major terms explained in this title. One of them is Mahamudra, and the other is the simultaneously occurring. And how the Mahamudra is uninterrupted, and how the simultaneously occurring is temporary or interrupted. Mahamudra is what is called the basic nature. It's the basis. And that is uninterrupted. It's something that always was and is. And it has these three simultaneous qualities of being voidness, being clarity, and being intelligence. That's the basis. From that basis, and because of our ignorance, then on that basis there is projection, there is experience. So you've got like the basis, and then what that gives rise to, which is called a experience or manifestation. That experience and manifestation comes and goes. It's impermanent. Every moment it comes and it goes, it comes and it goes. And this voidness, clarity and intelligence is also not just those three things simultaneous with each other, they're simultaneous with every momentary delusion. So when we use this term arises simultaneously with what? With this moment's ephemeral passing thing, arises simultaneously with the next moment's. The basis is the same, but then what it's arising with comes and goes, so that's interrupted, it's not lasting. But the basis itself, mind's clarity, mind's voidness, mind's intelligence, doesn't come and go. It's present along with all of those passing phenomena. Is that all right?
Can you explain? Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. You go first.
Can you explain the difference after you use the term intelligence and clarity?
Det rikpa dan salwa ne tetshira rikpa dan salwa ke chepa karare
ripa de tomba de ko bare savati ti ronjen de la ko bare ripa savani chepa de shegana
the rikpa salwa tongpa sungina
honya pe choji go wa chedo ti ripa chi ora sava se tomba se ji de ta mi san da wo ji ore ti ripa de se ji de ra jin kwa chedo no zo de ta ronje la ko san de sina ripa de ronje la ko ni no tomba de di ronje de ngo de la ko di ronje ji ora sava de se ji de nomba de la ko nomba de la.
If we take those three terms and we see what they apply to, then the intelligence is what knows the nature. The voidness is what knows the essence, and then the clarity is what knows the actual form, if we use the word form in the general sense. So you've got the form of what actually manifests, that is clear, clarity. Understanding its nature is the intelligence, and the voidness is like the heart essence of that nature, the inner essence of that nature, if we separate the three.
I
would like to give an example for this.
Allah dina cho ya chen du ya jan zo la sa wa se ji de Allah da la song no dong sa wa se ji de ho ya rong yan se ji de 디 알라다도 장초니 코로 이게지리 니마 카카메리라
Also.
야 달아서노도 동바 세제도 디 알라가 넘바데용 랭히바리 켜리 켜랭히 코로 지롱게리 야 디 장초도용 랭히레 랭히게비롱 데이디나 슈통하제가 롱 코롱 모도 동바리 tini rongya ta korong ta zuyga zindawo mare tini nomba ndama ndandu tandawo pena janso do alani patasala ndama mare nomba kakadawo janso na ba nyede zindawo alani yanche de zindawo mare nomba sawa rete tanda sono tongo na pi nomba zangji ma tu tanda le penju mere janso la yante kare yo na ti ala ta la yante ta yo re tendawo ti 안도나나 nomba seje to rongkyo seje tomba seje to usu tendizo sono kona tentezo le la yo jire
So, peding on rangshin de lenshin silwa de
sawa de bena janso ina janso go nomba wanchen na chi nomba sawa la ta ri mo bo ra bena wanchen wana janso ni wa ala yo na ala la ramanda diwa tani di nomba inanda jansu nomba inanda koro nomba tala sabati di nomba tala ako kariyo di na yoji to patasara tani tomba seje ta kari dinana jansu rongyanta dinana chepare che ina yo chi ngo to kari yore dinana lehi jirongye selmare sa ina jibo me ina chabo oya che ina lehi jirongye la duanga ji pechano hejiwa tani rongye la je ko rongye 스치기 세가자 말이에요. 코로나때 들이 쳐서래. 뭐야? 다든다고 지사이거나 때도 리라요. 선노 동사이거나 때도 간대.
So, one example that would be very helpful if we think about it, if we take the ocean and the ocean's currents and waves, then if when we examine the current and the wave, first of all, if we look at its form, which is, we said the form it takes, which is the example for clarity. The form it takes is the movement of water, let's say. And it is, in that sense, its essence is water itself, so it's no different from the ocean. The wave and the current is not something other than the ocean. You can't separate them. So its essence, the essence of the ocean, is the same. It's water. And then its nature is the nature of water, which is to be wet and fluid. So if we look at the very essence, so if we take this example, we say the essence is voidness. The essence of the waves, the essence of the ocean, it's the same. It's water. If we look at the form it takes, then that is the movement of the water. What else have we got left? I'm losing one there. Nature. And the nature, which is its wetness, is what's known about it, so that's like the intelligence.
What's known about the act?
Yeah. It's the intelligence about the details of of what it is. It's an example. It's said the three can't be separated, but it's an example. If we think about the waves or the movements in water, then we can see they've got a certain form, they've got certain qualities, and they've got an essence. That's what we're talking about, the form, the qualities, the essence. So with the mind, it's got form, it's got qualities, it's got an essence. Yes, there was, behind there was, I can't see it, it looks like somebody, yeah, yeah. Khenpo means great. Uh-huh. Great, and in the explanation it meant there's nothing other than that. Khenpo Kidanda. Sherry, did you have a question?
다만 뒤서 좀 야마서.
나도 자전보로 변해 로와 지정원로